Greetings, everybody. Greetings, everyone. Pray you've been having a great week. Been having a great day so far. And welcome, dear listeners, to another episode of Divine Discussion with your host, Chief Apostle Veronica Yisrael. I'm honored that you've chosen to join me today for what I believe will be a transformative and necessary conversation. Today we're diving into a topic that's both timely and critical: the impact of patriarchy in religion and how it shapes our perceptions of women in leadership roles, both within spiritual community and in the broader political arena. For centuries, women have been marginalized, their voices suppressed, and their potential to lead questioned, often due to patriarchal interpretations of sacred texts and long-standing traditions. These perceptions haven't just remained within the walls of religious institutions, but they've steeped over into every facet of society, including politics. So in this episode, we're going to dissect these preconceived notions, explore their origins, and understand how they continue to influence the way we view women in positions of power, and right up to the highest position in the land, the highest office in the land in America, which is the presidency. This discussion is crucial as we strive for a society that values equality, diversity, and the empowerment of all individuals, regardless of gender. So let's get into it. To understand where we are today, in order to understand where we currently are, you have to remember the history, the past. So again, in order to understand where we are currently today in this climate, we must first look back at where these ideas of male superiority and female subordination in a religious context all began. Patriarchy in religion didn't emerge overnight. And certainly it won't be going anywhere overnight. It was cultivated over centuries, often justified by selective interpretation of sacred texts. Let's take a moment to consider how major world religions have historically viewed women. In many cases, these views have been less about spiritual truth and more about maintaining social order, specifically an order that places men at the top and women somewhere below. For example, in Christianity, we often hear about the male disciples of Yeshua, commonly called Jesus. But what about the women who were disciples and followed him? For instance, Mary Magdalene, often unfairly characterized as a repentant sinner, was actually a close confidant of Yeshua and a leader of the early Christian movement. She was known as the apostle to the apostles, aka Chief Apostle. Yet over time, her role, like the roles of many other women, were diminished or erased entirely as the church became increasingly male-dominated. In Islam, women like Khadijah, the Prophet Muhammad's first wife, were pivotal figures. Khadijah was not just a wife, she was a successful businesswoman and the first to embrace Islam. However, yet over time, as religion grew and spread, interpretation of the Quran and the Hadith increasingly emphasize male authority over women. Judaism, too, is not exempt, has its examples. The Hebrew Bible has a powerful woman known as Deborah, who was a prophet and judge. Let me reiterate that. Deborah was a prophet and judge of Israel, or the Hebrew people. She held the most powerful position before the monarchy began in their lineage. She was who led Israel to victory. But despite these stories, patriarchal interpretations have long limited women's roles in Jewish religious life. These selective interpretations have not just only justified male leadership, but have also marginalized and suppressed women's voices within spiritual communities. Let's let that sink in. I want to take a moment to highlight the role of women in the early Christianity specifically. We often think of the church as it is today, largely male-led, but the early Christian movement included significant female leadership. Women like Priscilla, Phoebe, and Joanna, who were apostles, deacons, and teachers, playing critical roles in spreading the message of Christ consciousness. However, as the church became institutionalized, these women's contributions were downplayed or outright erased, leading to the male-dominated hierarchy we are familiar with today. The historical context is important because it shows us that the exclusion of women in leadership roles in religion isn't a divine mandate. It's a result of culture and historical developments. And it's these developments that have had a profound impact on modern religious landscape. So what does this mean for us today? Let's look at the current status of women in clergy across various denominations. While there has been progress, I must admit, with some denominations ordaining women and allowing them to serve in leadership roles, there are still significant challenges. Women clergy often face barriers their male counterparts do not. For example, in some denominations, women can be ordained but are still barred from holding senior leadership positions like bishop or senior pastor. Even in denominations that fully support women clergy, disparities in pay and respect persist. But this isn't just about institutional barriers. It's about the psychological impact on women and society at large. Patriarchy in religious context doesn't just affect women clergy, it impacts how women are perceived in every aspect of life and how they perceive themselves. Many women raised in religious environments that subtly or overtly teach male superiority internalize these beliefs. It's ingrained in them, and then they really truly begin to believe and take on this understanding and these teachings of male superiority. They end up struggling with self-doubt, imposter syndrome, or feel the need to overcompensate to prove their worth. This isn't just an individual struggle, it's a societal issue that affects the way women are treated and how they treat themselves. These religious teachings have broader implications, influencing societal views on women in leadership beyond the religious setting. They contribute to a culture narrative that questions women's ability to lead, whether it's in the boardroom, the courtroom, or the Oval Office. Now, let's connect the dots between religion and politics. The link between the two is strong, especially in countries where religious beliefs significantly influence governance. This connection often means that patriarchal religious beliefs shape societal attitudes towards women in political leadership. Think about the challenges faced by women who've held or sought political office, like we're experiencing in today's climate in America, especially at the highest levels. Women running for president or prime minister often face a double standard. They are scrutinized not just for their policies or experience, but for their appearance, how they look, how they dress, how they carry themselves, the tone of voice, or even their family ties in life. This scrutiny is often rooted in patriarchal beliefs about women's roles, which are deeply influenced by religious teachings. For example, the idea women are naturally more nurturing, thus less suited for the tough decisions required of a leader, or the belief that a woman's place is in the home, not in the halls of power. These ideas are not just outdated, they are harmful and limiting. As the old folks used to say growing up, that the women's place was to be barefoot and pregnant at home, keeping a house. And these teachings and belief systems about women have been so harmful and limiting in so many ways. Let's take a moment to look at some examples of female world leaders who have broken through the political glass ceiling. Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, has been one of the most powerful women in the world for years. Yet she was often described in terms that focused more on her demeanor than her politics or her policies. Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, was praised for her compassionate leadership during crisis. But this was often contrasted with the strong leadership expected of male leaders. These women have led their countries with strength, compassion, and intelligence. Yet their leadership is often perceived differently compared to their male counterparts. This difference in perception is heavily influenced by underlying religious and cultural biases that stem from a patriarchal worldview. Now let's pause for a minute and take that in. I know this is a lot for some, but we must take the bull by the horn and face these topics because we are being affected by it, knowingly or unbeknownst to us. It's important to recognize that these biases don't just affect women who run for office. They affect all women who aspire to lead. They create an environment where women have to work twice as hard to be taken serious, where they are constantly navigating a minefield of expectations and stereotypes. This isn't just unfair, it's a loss for society as a whole. When we limit women's leadership opportunities, we miss out on the unique perspectives, wisdom, and approaches they bring to the table. We miss out on the possibilities of a more compassionate, inclusive, and just world. So how do we break this cycle, you may ask? What do we do? How do we empower women to step into leadership roles in both religious and political spheres and reshape society's view of female leaders? Well, let's start by looking at the role of women clergy who have actively and who are actively challenging the patriarchal structures within their religious communities. These women are not just leading, they are transforming the very foundation of their faith traditions. They're reclaiming sacred texts and offering new interpretations and providing a more inclusive and empowering narrative of spirituality. For example, women like Reverend Dr. Gaffney, a Hebrew Bible scholar who writes and teaches from a womanist perspective, are offering fresh, liberating interpretation of scriptures. Or Bishop Yvette Plunder, who founded the City of Refuge, United Church of Christ, a ministry that embraces all people, especially those who have been marginalized by traditional church doctrines. And I might add, for the Jewish community, Reverend Deborah Bowen in Philadelphia, who has the largest black synagogue for Jews in Philadelphia. And she's making great strides for women in leadership and changing the trajectory of how women are viewed and Judaism is viewed as a whole. And so many others that we cannot take the time to name, but they are making an impact and shaking the foundation of faith traditions. A clarion call is being called out that it's time to revisit the foundation and get to the root of the matter so that we all can grow and flourish in an egalitarian society. These women are showing us that leadership isn't about conforming to a patriarchal mold. It's about breaking free from it and creating something new. Their work is paving a way for future generations of women leaders in both religious and secular spheres. But it's not just about women who are already in leadership. It's about creating pathways for more women to step into these roles. Oftentimes, sad to say, a lot of time when we see some women in roles of power, religiously or otherwise, we don't see a lot of them making pathway or making efforts to ensure that it doesn't just stop with them. That we are making headway and ensuring that we have a seat at the table, and now those after us have a pathway to have a seat at the table. That they can continue to be educated and grow and be equipped to take leadership on. And that is the call upon every person who may have been marginalized and have been called to the forefront to lead, is to ensure that we break the glass ceiling and we set a pathway that others who have been marginalized can follow suit. So it's important that we keep that in mind. So with doing that and creating paths for others, that means providing mentorship, education, and supportive network for women at all stages of their leadership journey. It means challenging the internalized beliefs that hold women back and encouraging them to embrace their full potential. And it's about the power of collective action. Change doesn't happen in isolation. It requires a collective effort to challenge and dismantle the structures of patriarchy that hold women back. This means not just women supporting women, but also we need men standing as allies, advocating for women's leadership, and challenging the biases that exist within themselves and their communities. So in order to be an ally, for men to be an ally of women leadership, they have to confront their own biases that's within them. They have to work that out. They have to work out their prejudices, the patriarchal views that they have also been taught and ingrained in them. And do that work within, that inner work, to help lay a foundation that they can be allies and support their sisters. And not just want their sisters to support their work and stay under their thumb. So it requires work, that I must say. And it's going to take every one of us to work together to accomplish this. And especially in black communities, people of color, African Americans, people of color from every walk of life in every country. Because we have the tendency, once we are taught something, to perpetuate it, that we continue in it without question, without anything, without re-examining. Because the idea that we are taught in many black communities is that if you question it or try to re-examine it, then something's wrong with you. But there's nothing wrong with re-examining things. Maybe it's not working for us. To continue to do the same thing over and over again, not getting and expecting new results, is insanity. So we have to be willing to put in the work to help create a new path, to help create forge a new way forward. We can't just sit back and watch. We all have to do our part. And many people, they have their own opinion. They're talking about going to vote and this and that and third. But how many people voting decision is influenced by faulty religious dogma and doctrines? And so their views of their worldview is filtered through the faulty church dogmas or religious dogma. And those who view that a woman should not be in a leadership role and of power are going to automatically vote against a woman because they feel men are better suited for leadership roles, which is a fallacy. And we have to work within ourselves to correct that within ourselves, within our religious communities, within our culture communities. We have to do the work to correct that because there's so much proof of powerful women leadership through the ages that have helped to steady the ship and lead and forge a way forward for our different nations and society. As we come to the close of this powerful discussion on today, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've covered today. We've explored the deep roots of patriarchy in religion and how it has shaped the roles of women within religious institutions and the ripple effect this has had on society's perceptions of women in leadership roles, both in the church or religious communities and in politics. We've seen how these patriarchal structures have created barriers not just for women, clergy, but for all women who aspire to lead. We've also discussed the importance of challenging these structures, of empowering women to step into their rightful place as leaders, and of reshaping our societal views on women or female leadership. The key takeaway from today's discussion is this: the limitation placed on women by patriarchal interpretation of religion are not divinely ordained. I will say again that the greatest takeaway from today's powerful discussion is that the limitation placed on women by patriarchal interpretations of religions are not divinely ordained or inspired. They are man-made constructs, and like all constructs, they can be deconstructed and rebuilt in a way that honors and dignifies the humanity of all, the true equality of all people. I want to encourage each and every one of you that are watching live and that will watch the replay. I want to encourage you, beloved, to take this conversation beyond the podcast. Not just listen to it one time, but continue to listen to it to help dismantle these patriarchal beliefs that have been ingrained within us, that paradigm that has been placed within even our subconsciousness. And let us reflect on your own beliefs, our own beliefs and attitudes towards women in leadership. Consider how you can support and advocate for women in your community, whether in the church, religious communities, spiritual communities, in politics, or in any other sphere of influence. Think about what you can do to support your sisters in their endeavors to obtain leadership roles. Because many times we know many women are more suited for the job, more suited for the position, got more experience and education, but because of our patriarchal views that God don't use a woman, that spirit cannot operate in women to be in leadership over a man or males, is causing us by default to make an error in decision and keep suppressing the voices of women to lead. You know, growing up, I grew up around different holiness churches, apostolic churches, should I say, at one point, that believe God can use a woman or the divine can use a woman. However, that spirit only went so far. She could go out and evangelize in that context as a missionary, as an evangelist. She could start up a mission. There's some of y'all from back in the day that understand or been around old people what a mission is. It's not a full-fledged church, but it's on its way to becoming. So they could start a mission, hold services, run meetings and revivals, get souls connected to this mission. And once it became full-fledged and she could teach them, lead them and guide them in spirituality. But once it wanted to be a full-fledged church in communion with the organization or the greater church, which they were a part of, they had to relinquish their position over to a man because a woman could not pastor. Now just think about that. The woman could bring them to their understanding of Christ, could teach them in the ways of God, of their understanding, could pray for them, heal them through gifts of spirit, do all of those things, cast out unclean, evil, negative energy and spirit from these people, and get them from a low energy state and place in life, and bring them to what we would consider respectable people in society. Some of these people were strung out on alcohol, on drugs, and all of these different things. Now, a woman could do all that, but she could not pastor. She couldn't hold the title and the position of pastor of the local congregation. And she could not receive all rights, duties, and privileges that the male counterparts enjoyed with the title of pastor and being ordained and full-fledged as an elder in the community. Now, what that says to me, and watching, I've never believed in that. What that says to me is that you allow your women to do the hard, dirty work, quote unquote, to get out there and dig out a whole congregation. Many of them put their hard sweat, money, and blood into building these places, just to be told that, okay, this is where you stop. Now a man come from somewhere else and take over. Even one of these congregations, that one of the men that she brought to Christ through her ministry in building this church was assigned by the bishop in that diocese to now take over her position and pastor the church. Now how did that not? Now, just think about that. These are the things that patriarchal biases and belief system causes. Men and women have led and done the work, but they didn't get the credit because they were born a man, or born a woman, rather, excuse me. According to patriarchal views, they were born the wrong gender, so they cannot lead. They are subjugated, relegated. Even many people having sisters and mothers still believe that they can police the women's body. This is what patriarchal, faulty beliefs and viewpoints has us. Growing up, I saw many women accused of causing men to be tempted just because the man didn't have the fortitude and the ability to keep himself under subjection. He didn't have the willpower to control himself. So the woman was blamed for his actions. This is what faulty patriarchal views in religious setting causes. When many of our sisters and our mothers and our cousins, female cousins, have been raped in the past, they have been assaulted, it has been made to believe that it was their fault because of how they dress, because of how they walk, their mannerisms. Many times, some of the, to be honest with these women, didn't even have these men on their mind. Wouldn't even think about these men. But because we lean into these harmful doctrines and dogma that has the underlying patriarchal viewpoints, we betray our sisters and our mothers and our female cousins and family members, all because of a misguided belief that men are superior to women. But I want you to remember this, that every male and every body that came into this world came through a womb of a woman. No exceptions. They were born, they were nurtured in that womb. went through their process of growing in their womb. And how can it be that the woman is the mother of all, but the least respected, the least honored, the least looked to for guidance and leadership? How is that so? How can she birth you, rear you, teach you, comfort you, guide you, but yet she's not capable to lead you in the courtroom, lead you in the halls of power, lead you in the open office, lead you in the congregation? These are things to think about. These are things to consider. That we have to deconstruct these patriarchal views that are harming our society. Many societies of antiquity have been egalitarian, where women have had equal rights and positions. Think about it. Think about where you stand in all of this. How do you view your own mother, sister, cousin, aunt, your female friends, your wife? How do you view them as less than? Do you view them that they should remain in their place, whatever that means? See, teachings like this, the topics and the conversation like this, chip away at these biases that we have deep-seated within us. A lot of times you can notice it when some people, they will take advice and seek counsel for men, but when a woman say it, they don't want to hear it. They don't take it. They don't trust it. But when a man say it, they take it without question. That lets you know that there's a patriarchal bias operating within you, in your consciousness, even if it's in your subconscious, that you dismiss. A lot of men have made mistakes. Husbands have made mistakes like that. Fathers have made mistakes like that because the wife, the daughter, the mother, the sister, the cousin, the aunt gave them wisdom and advice on what to do. Yet, because it didn't come from a man, they disregarded and took someone else's advice into their own peril, into the peril of their family, to the peril of their congregations, to their society, to their groups, all because of a belief of male superiority. Many men are afraid of women getting power because they're afraid that women are going to do what they've done with power, misuse power, misappropriate power, and they're afraid of that. Even if they're more educated, if they have more wisdom. You know, one thing about the female, the woman, that is very intuitive and connected to spirit. Not that men cannot be in art. The woman, she's very in tune to spirit, to the elements, to nature, to the divine, and they can sense through their giftings. Because a lot of times our male counterparts, they checked out and don't harness that intuition, that gift within them. And so sometimes the leadership is not guided by the intuition and spirit. It's just rigid. And we make mistakes that way because we don't follow spirit. Just think about this. And we're wrapping up. I want you to think about this. For Pentecostals that may be watching, that grew up in the Pentecostal apostolic holiness movement, Many of those who came up in those early days or back in the day when they were young, many of those who came to their understanding of Christ at the time, and they went to the altar, and especially for those that went to tarry, for those who know what that means, for the Holy Spirit or the Holy Ghost. 9 times out of 10, a woman working with you, it was a woman working with you, not a man. She guided you, she led you, she prayed you through. Even the Baptists, when they had the mourners bench, the mothers would be there praying you through, guiding you, teaching you, helping you to come through. But yet, we still view women in a different light, as less than, when we all were created equal by the divine. There's one passage of scripture in the Greek scriptures commonly called the New Testament that states, there's neither male nor female, bond nor free, Jew nor Greek, Gentiles, all of that. But we are all one within Christ's consciousness, within this concept, within this one divine mind. But how is it that we still haven't grasped that teaching? Yeshua, commonly called Jesus, was supported financially heavily by women. He had women disciples. But how is it that they've been whitewashed and written out of history, out of the Holy Writ that we have presented, canonized? And as I often say, anything that man has a hand in will always have flaws. Some people don't like that statement, but it's the truth. Because we put our own perception and our own understanding in there. So it's not about God's will, it's about society, historical viewpoints, and our patriarchal views that matters in some of these issues. It's not about God, it's about ego. We don't want to give up our ego. We don't want to give up our position because we're afraid we're going to lose power. What is power if you don't help the marginalized community? What is power anyway if you don't do what's right with it and you don't have correct judgment? What good is it anyway? Just to have it, to say we have it and don't dispense righteous judgment? This is things to consider. Men and women have died and left this earthly plane, not fulfilling their potential, not because they didn't want to, didn't have a desire to, but because of patriarchal views that said the man rules over the woman and the woman has no place in leadership. So there's a clarion call going out saying we need to re-examine these things. We need to take a second look at this. Because the divine, God by all names, is spirit. And spirit dwells within a body. Not just a male body, but in anybody who will avail themselves to work in connection, in conjunction with the Spirit. So we have to take our biased views out of the way and really sit with ourselves and do the inner work, the shallow work, to work through these preconceived notions. There are many of them, but especially on our topic today, about women in leadership and of power. There are many denominations that will now allow a woman to pastor a congregation or to be a spiritual leader, but not to ascend to the bishopric, not to ascend to apostleship, not to ascend to be an ordained elder, to these high positions. And it's time out. And let me say this, it's time out for women going along with the status quo. We have our part to play. And how patriarchy still has a hold in societies and in our religious communities. We have to know who we are and stand 10 toes down on it. Anything worth having is worth fighting for. And we have to be willing to put in the work and fight. We can't do it alone, but we got to first make a move to stop believing the lie and the preconceived notions. Because it even affects how women treat each other. Feeling like one is better than the other, all of this is the working behind the scene, underlying patriarchal views that cause us to fall into imposter syndrome, or to cause us to overcompensate, or to cause us to be envious and jealousy of another. So let's look at the root. Not just at the bad fruit or the bad leaves or limbs. Let's look at the root of this thing and where it comes from, and then take steps to find the way forward. Because the generations after us need us to move forward and not leave them in a situation where they're cleaning up our mess again. But we should lead the generation further on into the future. And I want to encourage everybody, please go out and vote, but not just for the presidential election, but even in your local community. Because when you don't put the right people in the local offices, how do you think people finally from your local community end up in Washington? Because they move through the ranks. Because we do not care, or we so, as the old folks say, so heavenly minded that we're no earthly good. But there has to be a balance within us to be concerned about society, to be concerned about the things that are going on around you, and not just the mindset of you're for and no more. These are the things that we have to look at and embrace and face the challenge, and stop turning a blind eye, and let's do the hard work. So I encourage each and every one of you, consider your own beliefs and attitudes towards women in leadership. Consider how you can support and advocate for women in your communities, whether it's in the church, spiritual communities, in politics, or in any other sphere of influence. Remember, breaking the divine glass ceiling starts with each of us. It starts with us questioning the status quo, challenging our preconceived notions, and embracing the potential for a more just and equitable world. Let us move forward into equality and an egalitarian society. For those who follow the master teacher, Yeshua, commonly called Jesus, he was indeed for equality. He was indeed for egalitarianism. If you don't know what that is, look it up. And we all have to push forward in that. I want to thank you for joining me today on Divine Discussion with your host, Chief Apostle Veronica Yisrael. I hope this episode has inspired you to think differently, to act boldly, and to support the women in your life who are stepping into leadership roles. Together we can create a future and a culture where all are truly equal in spirit and in society. And before we close, I want to give you a glimpse of what's coming up in our next episode. We'll be diving into the topic, Sacred Voices, amplifying women's leadership in spiritual and secular spaces. So be sure to tune in to our next episode. It will surely be a blessing to you. And again, we thank you all for your support in whatever way you find fit to do so. Please remember to like, to share, to comment, to subscribe, to share it to a neighbor, share it to a friend. Those are ways that you can support us and get these episodes and these teachings out, that it can inspire and take root in somebody's heart and life to have a different outlook on life, and in each setting of worldview and in spirituality. We are here to help you on your journey in your spiritual growth and in your whole personhood in totality. And if you would like to give financially to support this work, to say thank you for what you're doing, thank you for teaching and sharing. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to give, the Cash App is pinned. It's $ capital VSY lowercase ISRAEL 2021. We thank you so very much for all that you do to help us continue bringing high quality content and help us get the equipment and different things that we need to continue to do this work, because it's about justice, equality, and humanity, and having a respect for all humanity, no matter where they come from. And so we love you all. Until then, until next time, stay blessed, stay empowered, stay curious, and remember, the power to change the world starts within you. Peace be with you. Until next time.